NoSpinNewsSource.com.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all across the planet, wherever you are. I'm Kari Ilonummi, your host with NoSpinNewsSource.com. This is your monthly report for September 2012. So, we'll be discussing a whole bunch of objects. A quick breakdown will be my Portland trip. I recently went on down to Oregon. I spoke at a fluoride event. Testimonies that was given before what would be Portland Mayor Sam Adams and the City Council. They are the largest city in the country not to have fluoridation in their water, and even as I was on a vacation down there, just enjoying a few days, thinking I was going to be away from politics, not that I, don't mind being around it all the time, but still, I find myself still doing politics and stuff and whatever, and spending a day down at City Hall. But that's okay. I had a great time. I learned a lot, spoke with some good people, activists, people on both sides of the line that are for and against adding fluoride, and so on and so forth. But we'll go more into that later in the show. We'll be discussing as well Moody's dropping the rating on U.S. T-bills, Ted Turner's take on the current human population and what he would like to see happen. Do you think it's going to be a reduction? It could be. We'll see. We'll talk about that more. We had a detailed breakdown of the 9/11 2012 event regarding the murder of U.S. Ambassador Stevens, the Libyan ambassador. West Nile virus hitting the United States with over 1,100 cases on record, according to the Center for Disease Control, the CDC. Former President Jimmy Carter's letter regarding the abuses of this president, regarding our constitutional rights. We discussed this in a past show. Today we'll be discussing it more. We have the EPA being sued in federal court for illegal experimentation on human subjects using diesel fuel and whatnot regarding gas, putting them into gas chambers. Sounds like something from Adolf Hitler's or some conspiracy theory, but it's reality. So, did Ron Paul rip us off? One of the biggest election scams of 2012. That's right. Now, I know I have many what would be libertarians that are watching the show, and some of you recall from past shows and whatnot, and reading and hearing what I have to say, that I've always been for Ron Paul. I voted for Ron Paul 4 years ago, ultimately. I'm one of those people that if there's no dirt on you, if there's no proof, then guess what? You're innocent until proven guilty. So I have had no dirt, no evidence, no reason to feel that Ron Paul was a bad guy. So I've supported him. I don't agree with all of his economic and other practices. Austrian economics is BS, personally. Austria and American economics are two different things, just like they're two different nations. So I support Alexander Hamilton and the American system of political economy and the Constitution fully, not just here or there. But anyway, Ron Paul potentially ripped us off. We'll discuss that more. The presidential elections, will Mitt Romney save us? Is this going to be the new Caucasian version of change you can believe in? Or what will it be? Now, remember a few shows ago I said that Mitt Romney is going to start touting constitutional principles? Remember that? Well, if you haven't, watch my past shows. I've been discussing this. He's going to start sounding more constitutional. He's going to start discussing the flagrant disregard for the constitutional principles that Obama is obviously guilty of, such as War Powers Act and different things within the Congress. So, like I said, we'll go more into that in the show and a whole lot more. But before we go into that, you got to see this video from Cleveland. And my question to you is, do you have your Obama phone? Well, this woman does, and she's going to tell you just why she is so feverish to support this president, Barack Obama, in a re-election, because Obama gave her a phone. It's called Obama Phone. Check this video out. It has over 3 million views on YouTube, and it's only been up for 10 days.
Sustainable development has become the popularized expression for Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is the 1992 United Nations Rio Declaration on the environment and development.
It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
Agenda 21 defines itself as the comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems.
It also elevates nature above man. And it contains something called the precautionary principle, where basically you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
Sustainable development is the philosophy designed to bring human beings across the globe under the full control of a narrow human elite.
It's a 40-chapter document to basically control the world. It's based entirely on socialist control mechanisms.
Sustainable developers have designed a global movement coordinated through a global to local action plan to create world government in accordance with certain objectives. These objectives include an end to national sovereignty, the abolition of private property, the restructure of the family unit, and increasing limitations and restrictions on mobility and individual opportunity.
The green goal includes the listings of what's not sustainable. A couple of the examples include private property.
728 lists fossil fuels.
Golf courses and ski lodges are not.
Consumerism.
Irrigation is not sustainable.
Paved roads.
Commercial agriculture.
Herbicides, pesticides. Elsewhere, it lists farmlands, pastures, grazing of livestock,
and the family unit. The focus of sustainable development is the abolition of private property, societal undermining of the family, and abandonment of the constitutional protection of unalienable rights as described in the Declaration of Independence. You see, I sat on the Santa Cruz Agenda 21 committees. Now, this was a lot of crazy ideas. This was back in the mid-90s. Crazy ideas I heard. Mother Earth's surface wasn't to be scratched. Human beings were to be concentrated into human settlement zones. Educational systems were to focus on the environment as the central organizing principle. All aspects of life were covered. Well, I went to these committees at the request of some people who told me that I needed to understand what was going on, and I came back and I said, this is craziness. This is so silly. It has no chance of having any effect on our society. Well, I was wrong.
The United States government's support for sustainable development, Agenda 21, is very clear. In 1992, while the Rio Conference was going on, George Bush, then president, was there, where he executed the Agenda 21 protocols on behalf of the United States and brought it back to Washington, D.C. Within a year, Bill Clinton, by executive order, no congressional review, established the President's Council for Sustainable Development. In Santa Cruz, we've got a 2-lane freeway system. We need 4. But what we're getting is hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money to take a dilapidated rail line that Southern Pacific wants to put in the hands of somebody else so that a commuter line can be built along the railroad track. That'll be followed by 14-story buildings where people will live and stack them in pack-in units, where developers or so-called sustainable developers will build these high-rises with federal dollars. In fact, Santa Cruz has received a $300 million federal grant to build the first 3,000 of these stack-them and pack-in units. The County Board of Supervisors said, if you were a sustainable developer, you're immune from any construction defect liability. It's a partnership between selected developers building this new world order and the government using the American taxpayer dollars in order to do it. This is a map of the Wildlands Project. To explain the map, the red are areas that are to be off limits to human beings. No resource development, no human activity. If you live there, you won't. The yellow areas are the areas for major control of all human activity. If you live there, you will. The black areas, the black dots, are the smart growth zones. That's where human beings are to be stacked and packed in small living units along rail tracks. The smart growth program ultimately has jobs assigned and children cared for by the state.
The question has been asked many times how the people who are perpetrating these things expect to do this and make it last. And the answer to that is that you steal a generation of children and you indoctrinate them so that they accept these ideas and they become global citizens in the coming global village.
UNESCO came out and declared 2005 to 2015 the decade of education for sustainable development. But they go on to say that it will encompass the 40 chapters of Agenda 21. That is your federal national curriculum. The entire purpose of second grade social studies is to transfer loyalty from the family to the government and teach them about sustainable economic consumption. Students construct their own understandings of reality and realize that objective reality is not knowable. So why bother? The truth is, the truth, which keep men free, is being suppressed in order to prop up the attitude training agenda. And it moves on. This is our new math called connected mathematics. Standard 3 tells us that students learn that mathematics is man-made, that it is arbitrary, and good solutions are arrived at by consensus. Most of us assume 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4. You're wrong. We might reach a new consensus. How well does it work? Well, they tell you in the teacher's guide in the back, it tells us that because the curriculum doesn't emphasize arithmetic computations done by hand, some students may not do as well on tests assessing computational skills. We believe such a trade-off in the favor of CMP is very much to the student's advantage in the world of work. Our children are mathematically illiterate on purpose. How do I know on purpose? Why isn't this just a basic bad idea? Because the Sustainable Development Plan tells us so. Generally, more highly educated people who have higher incomes consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability. Charlotte Iserby, I owe you an apology. I did not believe for the longest time it was a deliberate dumbing down. I thought that dumbing down was a natural consequence of a bad idea. Folks, it's deliberate. It's deliberate.
The sustainable globalist goal is the orchestration of a planned fall of American principles, values, and lifestyles. The effect on the average American will be devastating. With modernizing technology, the ordinary person will live without independence, privacy, or substantive rights.
Another press conference that I attended was the ICLE group, the International Committee for Local Environmental Initiatives. It helps in the implementation of Agenda 21 in all of our local communities. And one of the speakers was Harvey Rubin, who happens to be the vice chair of ICLE. And I asked him about the correlative rights that Americans derive from the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And that, of course, is your individual liberties, your private property, your freedom of speech. I asked about it clashing with Agenda 21. And you know what his response was? Individual rights must take a back seat to the collective.
Obama! You got Obama phone?
Yes, everybody in Cleveland, low minority, got Obama phone. Keep Obama in president, you know. He gave us a phone.
Give you a phone.
Do more.
How do you give you a phone?
You sign up if you on full stamps, you on Social Security, you got low income, you disability.
I have a question. Okay, what's wrong with Romney again?
Romney, he sucks. Hey! Obama.
You got Obama phone?
Yes, everybody in Cleveland, low minority, got Obama phone. Keep Obama in president, you know. He gave us a phone.
He
Give you a
gonna
phone.
do more.
How do you give you a phone?
You sign up if you on food stamps, you on Social Security, you got low income, you disability.
And welcome back to the show. Now that is someone who makes Obama supporters and a lot of people out there, quite frankly, look pretty dumb. So, I don't know if she said she was on food stamps or full stamps. I couldn't quite tell there, but either way, she's very, very delighted to be supporting Barack Obama. So, it's interesting, the world we live in, huh? Who's going to give me the most free stuff? Anyway, there's a price to pay, let me tell you. So, there's a price to pay. So here we go. We have United States Congressman Representative Dennis Kucinich calling for what would be forced GMO labeling of all foods, what would be the genetically modified labels. The proposition, I want to say Proposition 31, but I can't recall the number. The proposition in California forcing, mandating what would be the GMO bills, the GMO labeling of genetically modified foods has went through the primaries and will be being looked at here. So that's exciting, and that's what we need to see too, is around the nation, is that we deserve to know what we're eating. If it's genetically modified, I think it should be illegal to have those out there genetically modified foods even to be on the market. And what I mean by that is when we know clearly that there is evidence showing that there are major health defects that are caused by these GMOs, at least under the current circumstances, as we're mixing what would be jellyfish, as we're mixing scorpion genetics and other animals and poisonous variables into our food crops. Well, you know, call me a conspiracy theorist, but common sense tells me that these things could be playing with our DNA. So I think we should be doing long-term studies before we allow anything to be on the market. And obviously, no matter what, even if we think it's pure safe, you, the customer, deserves to know what you're purchasing. So Representative Walter Jones and retired military held a press conference on HCR, House Resolution 107, House Concurrent Resolution 107, which is regarding impeachment at 10 a.m. on September 21st. They discussed this. What would be General Hoare had comments read for him on his behalf by Executive Intelligence Review counterintelligence personnel Jeffrey Steinberg, and there were other individuals as well, brass within the military, including the former Chief of Staff to former Secretary of State Colin Powell. He was there and discussed these variables and whatnot as well from a military perspective and standpoint regarding this president, and how we do have War Powers Act, which is a Congress, is the one that decides and passes war, not the president. We don't live in a dictatorship, do we? The U.S. was warned 3 days prior to 9/11 that Libyan embassy attacks were going to happen, but Susan Rice denies it. She denied it, which is interesting. And senators asking for the official, questioning the official 9/11 Libyan story. What and when did they know what they know? So, which is a really interesting question, and we're going to go into this here. This here is titled Grounds for Impeachment, Timeline of Obama's Cover-Up. It's a LaRouche PAC article in which goes over the timeline and breaks down the discrepancies and whatnot. This here is by Nancy Spanis, which is editor-in-chief of Executive Intelligence Review. What would be... there was a whole bunch of variables. In spring of 2012, the State Department contracts with British SAS-linked Blue Mountain Group to handle security of the Benghazi diplomatic compound. Blue Mountain hires Libyan nationals who are unarmed. Now that's interesting, isn't it? That's interesting. So the British call up guards that are unarmed to guard this compound, a United States embassy. Doesn't sound real secure to me. I got more arms and security right here at my house than that. Damn, I got enough to arm several people if I need to, and a bunch of people with machetes and swords. The frequency of attacks by, this here's April through June 2012. The frequency of attacks by the jihadi groups in eastern Libya area around the Benghazi increases. leading to International Committee of the Red Cross suspending operations in the east after an attack on its Misurata complex, June 12th. Convoys transporting the UN country chief and the British ambassador were attacked in April and June, leading to the British government shutting down the consulate soon after. According to the New York Times article, 4 Special Forces soldiers were sent to Benghazi to augment the security and conduct a national security assessment. We have August 27th, the U.S. State Department's Bureau of Consular Affairs warned U.S. citizens against all but essential travel to Libya. The incidents of violent crime, especially carjacking and robbery, had become a serious problem. In addition, political violence in the form of assassinations and vehicle bombs has increased in both Benghazi and Tripoli. Now, September 8th, according to New York Times article, U.S. officials in Benghazi met with security leaders to ask for a threat assessment. A senior Libyan official told the Times that if, quote, if there's going to be any foreign presence in the city, it better be discreet, unquote. Jamal Barak. Okay, so September 9th, the U.S. State Department receives credible information that the American missions might be targeted in Libya, according to U.S. diplomatic sources. However, no warnings were given for diplomats to go on high alert and lockdown, under which movement is severely restricted. This is according to the London Independent, September 14th. Now, September 10th, you have Ayman al-Zawahiri, the Egyptian emir of Al-Qaeda, released his annual message on the eve of 9/11/2001, calling for attacks on Americans, especially in Libya, in retribution for the drone murder of senior Libya Al-Qaeda operative Abu al-Libi, who was killed June 4th, 2012. So, excuse me, that was my first date there was messed up. It's supposed to be 9/11 of this year, 2012, not 9/11 of 2001. So, August, early September, here on the time frame range. We have, according to handwritten journal found by CNN on the floor of the Benghazi compound, Ambassador Stevens was aware and worried about, quote, the never-ending security threats, unquote, that he was facing in Benghazi, and especially about the, quote, rise in Islamic extremism, unquote, and, quote, growing Al-Qaeda presence in Libya, unquote, and being, quote, an Al-Qaeda on a hit list, unquote. Wow. Look, this goes on and on and on, but this is what I'm going to say, because we do have a whole bunch of things to discuss. There's a cover-up here. We have senators, we have people in the Congress, both sides, representatives and Senate, discussing this, launching probes into this, discussing the official narrative, and demanding Secretary of State and others to hand over vital information and to let us know what's happening. We have former CIA Director Michael Hayden directly blamed President Obama for the death of U.S. Ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens, as well. So that is a heavy-hitting element regarding a former CIA Director, Michael Hayden, stating this. Because a lot of people gave what would be Mitt Romney a lot of flack when he came on TV a day or two after these events and blamed the Obama administration for this. As a matter of fact, he lost a few points of approval rating because a lot of people felt this was another divisive government agent that's just making the other guy look bad. But he was actually right about that. I can't give Mitt Romney a lot of credit, but I do have to give him that. South African Bishop Desmond Tutu calls for former British Prime Minister Tony Blair to be hauled to The Hague for crimes against humanity. And according to him, we're one step closer to that as well. George Monbiot of the London Guardian stated, quote, here it is, we are one step closer to seeing Tony Blair at The Hague, unquote. So war crimes are coming down on these individuals. Ben Bernanke, Fed chairman, discusses quantitative easing 3, and in the background, they're already talking about QE4 as well, before QE3 even passes. So we have more quantitative easing. What they're doing is, they are buying a little time. They're like using duct tape on a boat that's going down in the ocean. Get past these elections, and then we're really going to see it fall. And I want to say this on the record as well. I'm expecting a complete blowout of the United States economy by May of 2013. That's right. April, May 2013, we're going to see a major blowout. If it's Obama or Romney, neither one of those guys are going to save us. Neither one of them support Glass-Steagall. Neither one of them support National Bank. Both of them support the National Defense Authorization Act regarding indefinite detention and all those extras that come with that. So, you can have a white guy, Caucasian, that's a so-called Republican touting constitutional principles, the new version, 2012, of Change You Can Believe In, or you can go back to Barack Obama for 4 more years. Either way, we're looking at dark times in the near future for the United States. I've mentioned before, we haven't hit 10% of the breakdown of this economy yet. Oh, I can assure you, we're going to be at the 25% mark before 2013 ends. So, FOIA suit filed for documents on the Sarasota Saudi links to 9/11 hijackers. Also, statesman and former presidential candidate Mr. Lyndon Larouche turns 90 years old, still strong, sharp, and with it, and providing us with the leadership and skills that we need. Thank you, Mr. Larouche. We have the Portland City Council regarding the fluoride variable, which I'll go a little bit more into now, end up voting 5-0. All for one, one for all, unanimously in favor on Wednesday, September 12th, 2012, to support adding fluoride to the water. So it's kind of sad, kind of interesting. We have several anti-fluoride advocates were removed actually during the hearing, not just from the day of it actually being put out, September 12th, but from the actual hearings, which I was at the beginning of the month of September. And I mean, there was one female that was actually physically assaulted by a guy. There was a lot of variables. People in there were very very excited, let's just put it that way. That's for sure, on both sides of the line, for and against it. And there was you could see there was a real tension between people regarding the adding of fluoride to the water. And ultimately, I was the last one to speak. You know, I bumped into what would be the mayor, Sam Adams, down there. Actually, was in the restroom for a couple moments, and you know, spoke with him for a few words. He said hi to me and whatnot. But ultimately, you know, I don't think that he's a bad guy. I don't think that most of the people that support fluoride are bad people. That doesn't mean I agree with adding fluoride to your water either, but this is what I'm saying. And if you look at the actual transcripts and video footage and go on to Portland, Oregon City website and view this for yourself, I was the last person to speak. It was at 8:30 p.m. that evening. It was a long day at City Hall, let me tell you. A very beautiful building, that is for sure, architecturally and whatnot. It's a wonderful city in general. I love Portland. But anyway, as I stated to begin with, my opening remarks, as after 12 hours of that, you can pretty well imagine anything that I or anybody else can come up with pretty well got said by that point. You know, there was PhDs, people from the EPA, scientists, people from the CDC. I mean, people from all over came and testified at this event from all over and whatnot. So with world credentials, and for and against. There were more people, doctorates that were for adding fluoride than there were against, but there were several heavy hitters as well, including a priest that came in, people with doctorate degrees in physics and science, and people with obviously information nonetheless, if they have those credentials or not. So ultimately, as I stated before the council and the mayor, Mr. Adams, which is now one of our followers on Twitter, that I don't doubt that it's a prudent endeavor upon the behalf of the vast majority of the individuals who are in support of fluoride, who spoke prior to me today, as I had said. I don't doubt that it's a prudent endeavor whatsoever. But at the same time, you know, I believe that most people mean well. I believe most people don't have the information that I do on a bigger picture of really what's in there. Not just some so-called isolated natural occurring element called fluoride, but really what is in there. A whole bunch of chemical toxins, byproducts from nuclear, steel manufacturing, so on and so forth. Really, it's not just fluoride. if you look into what's in there, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And when you look at, different things. So I didn't go into all that. But anyway, that's kind of a sidebar. But like I said before the council, that I don't doubt that it's a prudent endeavor upon most people's behalf. But this here is where, ultimately I draw the line. And that is, I have to consider the constitutionality of this. And even, let's play the devil's advocate for a second here. Let's pretend fluoride is 100% beneficial. Let's pretend that if you don't have fluoride, your life is going to be worse. Well, we all need protein. We all need carbohydrates. We all need trace minerals. We all need to drink a glass of water, like I'm sipping on here. I would be drinking raw milk, but I had a whole bunch of milk this morning, so I don't feel like drinking anymore. This is the thing. Can the government come rightfully to your door with a machine gun and say, here's your steak, here's your mashed potatoes and gravy, here's your steamed broccoli, here's your vitamin, you have to be healthy? So I mean that sounds absurd, doesn't it? To have the local police or military at your door making you eat your supper like you were a little kid. But the thing is, even if fluoride is good, this is forced drugging of the population. So I'm not even going to go into too much. I guess I kind of did my little sidebar a minute ago, but I'm not going to go too much into if it's beneficial or not. Not in this video. Not obviously there before the council, after everything was already stated before me and everybody was excited to get out of that room and hearing, as you can imagine. But after such a long day. But ultimately, you have to look beyond what appears to be good. You have to look beyond even what's good for us. We live in a nanny state where the government tries to tell you what to drink, what to smoke, what to do with your time, what you can read, and this and that and the other. When you have books like George Orwell's 1984 being removed from Kindle, that's right, you can't even have it. If you have a Kindle with that on there, it was automatically erased before now, unless you have another version or some other way of getting around that. You're tech savvy. But to begin with, it was adjusted. Now, as far as I know, it's not even for sale on Kindle, unless it's the readjusted book. So, and George Orwell's 1984 is a real good book to read to help understand these circumstances. And even George Orwell, may be surprised. He probably couldn't envision some of the stuff that's happening today, like TSA and everything else. So these people, they're getting us ready. They're getting us indoctrinated and prepared and ready. Just like how the TSA is popping up at music festivals, Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney political events. They're popping up at train stations, bus stops, proms of high school students. Not because it was an anonymous tip that Al-Qaeda is going to be there with a backpack bomb. No, just because they want to be there to make sure your kids are safe. Oh, that's right. So, here we go. We got Commissioner of Portland City, Randy Leonard, guaranteeing after the vote to have the fluoride in the water by March 2014. Now, I've been contacted recently by phone by some people down in Portland that are against the fluoride. They have reached out to me and are asking if I'd be willing to cover and discuss some of the stuff in potentially a future interview or whatever. Absolutely. I'd be delighted to do that. I'm waiting for their email. I'm willing to show all sides of the line. With this show, I try to stick with the real principles and the real factors. I'll be the first to acknowledge is I ran for city council and mayor of Arlington. So 3 campaigns prior to, I've never actually discussed fluoride or fluoridization of the water, not once downtown, not because I don't think that it's relevant, not because I'm scared to discuss it, but when you look at all these other things that are so in our face, blatant, that could potentially cause us to die a lot sooner than even fluoride, with the economy and everything and the breakdown of everything to where we have food prices shooting up double by next summer. It's one of those things where I've kind of put it on the back burner and seeing what takes precedent. But these are factors that have to be addressed and looked at. I've been putting up stuff on my Facebook and Twitter pages over the last year regarding this. Just haven't discussed it very much on the show. So another element for fluoride. New York City Councilman Peter Vallone Jr. has introduced legislation to eliminate fluoride from the city's tap water and claiming that it, quote, amounts to forced medication by the government, unquote. He goes on to state, this is the first real government acknowledgement of the problems, he says. And he goes, quote, I want it out. We are behind the curve on this. And it's true. So other people in the government are saying the same thing that I'm saying. People and other people that are familiar with the studies. Dr. Blaylock. We have 27 studies, including the recent so-called Harvard study, as it's being labeled, also known as the impact of fluoride on neurological development in children. It's a Harvard School of Publication published this online in the Environmental Health Perspectives on July 20th of this year, 2012, which shows brain damage associated with fluoride exposure, which actually lowers the IQ rating. So this is Harvard saying this. It's not just some backwoods stoner, druggy conspiracy theorist and, you know, down the street, you know, with the ponytail. This is right here in your face, whatnot. We also have what would be another article regarding Franken-scientists, as it's labeled, announce mutant GMO cows to produce hormone-induced, engineered, quote, milk for human babies. This is a Natural News article by Mike Adams, the health ranger of naturalnews.com. He states that the world of genetic engineering has fallen even further into the surreal with the announcement that New Zealand scientists have unveiled a genetically modified mutant cow which they say produces a reduced allergen milk for consumption by human babies. This is reported by the BBC and elsewhere. So, they cloned a cow, they altered the embryo using RNA interference. After gestation, the mutant GMO cow was born without a tail. But these scientists say, no problem, and that the mutation of having no tail couldn't possibly be related to anything they did with the cow's DNA. Says, I'm not making this up. This is the insanity of the quack science world in which we now live. So I put up a very interesting, highly controversial picture the other day of a cow that had human breast as it's feeding, nursing a human baby. If you want to know why I posted that picture, it's because of this. So as crazy out there as it sounds, it's happening one way or another. I mean, it doesn't quite have the, you know, the female version look of the teeth, but you know what I'm trying to say. The point of the story is, so the EPA, as I mentioned, is being sued for illegal experimentation of diesel gas into humans. And we have President Chavez of Venezuela said that if he were a United States citizen, he would vote for Obama. But going back to the EPA being sued for illegal experimentation of human beings, this is an article by Adnan Salazar of Infowars.com. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agencies and its administrator, Lisa Jackson, are on the defendant's end of a federal lawsuit claiming the agency conducted illegal human experimentation on unsuspecting study volunteers. The American Tradition Institute Environmental Law Center, ATI, issued a complaint against the agency last Friday, stating, quote, it failed to comply with the laws controlling human experimentation, unquote, in studies that were apparently testing the effect of, quote, fine particles, unquote, on human subjects who were, quote, more susceptible to the effects of air pollutants, unquote. In other words, participants who were already ill. The EPA and Jackson, in her official capacity, are targeted in the lawsuit for knowingly conducting experiments on humans that involved exposing those persons to toxic substances the agency believes will cause death and in which the agency therefore regulates under the auspices of the Clean Air Act. 42 U.S.C. Chapter 85. A statement regarding ATI's complaint reveals toxic particulate matter known as PM2.5, which was pumped into a gas chamber-like enclosure via an intake pipe located outside the building where diesel exhaust from a parked truck was being channeled into the building where the experiments took place. The ATI's lead counsel and director, David W. Schneier, contends that, quote, under EPA regulations and under EPA policy, this human experimentation is strictly prohibited, unquote. He also argues that the experiment's participants were not properly informed of the type of pollution that they would be inhaling, and the study researchers blatantly disregarded the known toxicity of PM 2.5. So, it goes on and on and on, but this is sounding like Nazi experiments, folks. That's what this is sounding like. So, this is what we're going to do at this point. At this point in the show, we need to discuss what would be the legitimacy, the legality of us invading Libya. Is the United States what would be permitted? Is this president permitted to have gone to war without the approval of the Congress? Now, I understand eventually Senators McCain and John Kerry eventually did, back this president, so on and so forth. But the question is this legal? Is this constitutional to declare war without Article 1, Section 8 in the War Powers Act? So, we'll see you right after this break, right now.
Consciousness turns once again to the United Nations. Many Americans, and especially the soldiers that serve the Commander-in-Chief and congressional declarations of war, are once again left out in the cold.
We were not asked, stunningly, in direct violation of the War Powers Act, whether or not you believe it's constitution. It certainly didn't comply with it. We spent our time worrying about the UN, the Arab League, NATO, and too little time, in my opinion, worried about the elected representatives of the United States. Do you think that you can act without Congress and initiate a no-fly zone in Syria without congressional approval?
Again, our goal would be to seek international permission, and we would come to the Congress and inform you and determine how best to approach this, whether or not we would want to get permission from the Congress. I think those are issues we would have to discuss as we decide what to do here.
Well, I'm almost breathless about that, because what I heard you say is we're going to seek international approval, and you will come and tell the Congress what we might do, and we might seek congressional approval.
If we're working with an international coalition and we're working with NATO, we would want to be able to get appropriate permissions in order to be able to do that. That's something that all of these countries would want to have some kind of legal basis on which to act.
What legal basis are you looking for? What entity?
Well, obviously, if NATO made the decision to go in, that would be one. If we developed an international coalition beyond NATO, then obviously some kind of UN security resolution would be
a coalition of... So you're saying NATO would give you a legal basis, and an ad hoc coalition of nations would provide a legal basis?
If we were able to put together a coalition and were able to move together, then obviously we would seek whatever legal basis we would need in order to make that justified. I mean, we can't just pull them all together in a combat operation without getting the legal basis on which to act.
Who are you asking for the legal basis from?
If it's obviously, if the UN passed a security resolution as it did in Libya, we would do that. If NATO came together as we did in Bosnia, we would rely on that. So we have options here.
His response is absolute confirmation that our military and executive branches have been hijacked by the United Nations, which is controlled by the New World Order agenda and promoted by the fiat currency banking cartels. How can the United Nations continue to subvert our sovereign constitutional authority to control the actions of our own United States military? Flashback to the Paris Peace Conference that ended World War I. A League of Nations was formed with a primary mission of maintaining world peace. The American Republican Majority Congress refused to join the League of Nations as Germany and the Axis powers all left the League of Nations, and World War II ensued. At the end of the Second World War, the United Nations picked up where the League of Nations failed. The Rockefeller family, one of the primary architects of the Federal Reserve System, donated the 17 acres on the East River of New York City to build the United Nations headquarters. Arranged by Nelson Rockefeller, the deal further solidified the modern presence of the Rockefeller influence in domestic and foreign policy. The United Nations houses 15 specialized agencies outside of New York City. All of the locations of the United Nations outside of the United States enjoy extraterritorial privileges. Thus, the activities of these various entities are sheltered from United States law. As the New World Agenda moves forward and global powers coalesce, the United Nations place the American military on the tip of their spear. The power to declare war was specifically reserved for Congress through the War Powers Clause. The President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and the Navy of the United States and of the militia of several states when called into the actual service of the United States. This power to command the military is specifically balanced by Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution, which vests in Congress the power to declare war. It reads, Congress shall have power to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. On the heels of the Korean and Vietnam Wars, primarily in response to the Gulf of Tonkin false flag operation, Congress passed the 1973 War Powers Resolution. The resolution was vetoed by the President. However, Congress overrode the veto with a 2/3 majority vote. The War Powers Resolution requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing military action and limits the deployment to 60 days with an additional 30 days for withdrawal. Only a declaration of war by Congress can authorize the 91st day of combat, disregarded by every president since the Korean War, and in modern times by both President Clinton in Bosnia and again by President Obama in Libya. The executive office seems to have forgotten that American soil must be attacked for the president to attack another country. America must insist the violators of constitutional law remove themselves or be removed from the public arena.
And welcome back. So I ask you, the people, does it sound like what Barack Obama is doing in Libya and other countries? Is this constitutional? Seems like a real predicament that we are in here. So, government finally admits that 9/11 toxins caused around 50 different types of cancer. Twitter ordered by U.S. federal judge Matthew A. Scurino from Manhattan to provide federal prosecutors, with all information on file pertaining to a guy named Malcolm Harris, a Brooklyn-based writer who previously was arrested with hundreds of other Occupy Wall Street protesters. We have Moody's dropping the T-bill, U.S. T-bill ratings. We have QE3, as I mentioned earlier, being pushed on the table. Here comes mass hyperinflation as the U.S. goes the way of the German Deutschmark of, if you remember, autumn of 1923. We're going into those type times. European Central Bank discussing quantitative easing unlimited for the countries of Europe. People are starting to get tired of these new bills being passed. More quantitative easing, a little bit more poison, a little bit more poison. The knife just goes in another inch every time further. So they're just going to make it unlimited. So don't you remember how quantitative easing 1 and 2, how these things, we're going to free up credit supposedly, help the economies, bounce things back on track, and create jobs and real stimulation, real change you can believe in? Well, here we are. Never thought we'd say this, but guess what? Well, I can't say I never thought we'd say this, but many never thought we'd be saying this. We're in a worse situation than we were 4 years ago with Bush and Cheney. And I'm no big fan of those guys at all. Obama on track to have the worst job record since World War II, according to Washington Times. Sweden aims at being the first cashless society. Ted Turner calls for reduction of the Earth's human population to approximately 2 billion people as well. Another one of these crazy fascist elite bastards with the Club of Rome and Royal Society when it comes to his opinion. I don't think he's a member of those groups, but he's with them in policy. Sheryl Crow blames a cell phone for her brain tumor. IRS claims that agents of the IRS will not be enforcers of the new Obamacare mandate, according to CNBC. Yeah, I think we will see that. I think that's incorrect. If the Supreme Court upheld it and says it's so-called constitutional to force you to buy a product, which is very unconstitutional, but I might add, that the IRS has no other choice but to uphold it with its officers. So they're just telling you what you want to hear to simmer down things a little bit. So hopefully you don't take your money and move out the country or something. Transportation, well, actually, angry mob scene of protesters climbed the wall of U.S. Embassy in Cairo recently. Transportation Secretary Norma Mineta stated that former Vice President Dick Cheney ordered NORAD to stand down and not to intercept the planes on September 11th, 2001 during the original attacks. So, also known as 9/11-2, because technically we had a 9/11 terrorist attack in 93, we had a 9/11 terrorist attack in 2001, and we just had a 9/11 as well terrorist attack in Benghazi with the assassination of U.S. Ambassador to Libya, Mr. Stevens. God bless all victims and families of 9/11. I want to say that since this is the what would be anniversary and time of what would be the September 11th era. This is a month. It's actually after September 11th right now. But anyways, so all of the first responders and victims of those people and families directly, God bless you. And that's a hard thing to deal with. Al-Qaeda is now a U.S. ally in Syria. Sometimes we call them our foe, sometimes we call them a friend. It makes it kind of confusing. Joint Chiefs of Staff take the lead to fight against having a World War III. That's right. General Martin Dempsey, Joint Chiefs of Staff, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is really one of the biggest decisive factors in keeping what would be the circumstances at bay and keeping us out of a World War III. And he even stated, quote, if we invade Iran, I don't want to be the one giving the order. It's not my choice. So he's clearing the way for history so he's not thrown before the Hague someday like Tony Blair, which does deserve it. So does our Congressman Rick Larson, anybody who's capitulated to those unconstitutional national defense authorization variables regarding indefinite detention, habeas corpus, due process, getting flushed down your toilet, and posse comitatus being removed, as well as you could be tortured and handled by the military tribunals if you ever even make it to a court date at all, if you even have a charge read to you. So anyway, EPA changes its rules to allow more toxic chemicals in mainstream food. That shouldn't surprise you now, especially when you just heard that they're experimenting on us and being sued for it. Anyway, U.S. Justice Department sued for hiding secret NSA surveillance program. Oh boy, it just keeps getting more deeper and darker as we look into this whole NSA spy program. Remember, it was all about Al-Qaeda, all about domestic and foreign terrorists. Remember that? I remember when Bush stated that the only way you would have your phone call tapped is if you are connected and discussing things with people overseas that are connected with terrorism. That's what he said. That's what Bush stated. I recall that myself. He stated that. So the only people in America that'll have your phones tapped are people talking to overseas people that have connections somehow to terrorism. Now when you hear that, people are like, hey, most people are like, I don't even know anybody in Europe. I don't even know anybody out the country. Half the people don't know people out of their own state. So unless it's just family or business. So with that being stated, you have to wonder. And now we actually see how things are being rolled out. And and this didn't just start. People argue, Kari, this economy and blah, blah, blah. This didn't just begin to happen under Obama. No. A lot of this stuff goes back, some of it goes back beginning decades, honestly. But we see the trend of things speeding up. After Bill Clinton, and you saw him, what would be sign on to the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which completely destroyed Glass-Steagall. Once we saw that, it led to the circumstances and conditions for a George W. Bush presidency. We saw what happened through 8 years of that, things we never thought could happen. And now, in the last, what would be coming up on closely to 4 years now, a Barack insane Obama, also known as Barry Soetoro originally, that the wheels keep speeding up. Now I'm going to say something about the presidential elections. I mentioned this. You have two options: Mitt Romney or Obama. Now you may be wondering, who are you voting for this year, Kari? The answer is neither. Neither. I'm not voting for either of these freaks of nature. Now, before you start criticizing me, calling my local newspaper to discredit me as I'm a congressional candidate, guess what? There's reasons for everything. If your two options are strychnine and cyanide, so which one do you want to eat this morning for breakfast, dear? If your options is a fascist bastard named Adolf Hitler or another fascist bastard named Mussolini to be your president, your leader, or whatever, I mean, do you really have options there? So people say you got to choose one or the other. I hear a lot of people, diehard liberal Democrats, far-reaching right Republicans on both sides, not real happy with these candidates. A lot of Republicans can't stand Romney, or at least don't quite trust him and feel he's electable. There's a lot of liberal Democrats that used to say a couple of years ago, quote, "I love Obama. I think Obama's a genius," unquote. That are now touting to other tunes and saying, well, I guess he's the better of two evils. Well, I know he's not the best president. Well, talking about a major decline there. So a lot of the African community, a lot of the gays, a lot of the people who were very, very supportive. A lot of people I remember that thought he was going to legalize marijuana and for darn sure at least allow states' rights to decide what they're going to allow for medicine. Remember, we thought all these things in the past. So-called change we can believe in. You still believe in it now? There were a few morons on the Titanic as the water was going up to their chin believed they were somehow going to be raptured. Maybe the boat won't sink. Maybe whatever. But guess what, folks? Now their skeletons are collecting debris and all kinds of minerals at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So don't stick with Titanic or Obama or any of these freaks until you're at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So I'm going to give another forecast here today. By July, 4th of July, 2013, the United States will be in a very, very, not just bad predicament economically. Chances are we'll be on the verge or already going into officially overthrowing Syria and then going into Iran. I believe that these things are on the table. Absolutely. I'm not going to say for sure we will have invaded and overthrown what would be Assad by for sure spring, but I can assure you that the momentum is building toward a World War III scenario. The perpetuation toward war is moving forward. So we have folks like General Martin Dempsey helping to put the brakes on things. But guess what? Even as Obama probably will not be reelected, and I don't think he will. I think Obama is burnt toast. He's gone. I see it. And I'm not saying that Mitt Romney's real good. He probably won't even give half of a good debate. If I was against either one of those idiots, I would tear him a new one in the debate. Let me tell you, I would. I would be gentle. And just wait to see me on C-SPAN with Congressman Rick Larson from the 2nd District here in Washington State. Just wait till I have him, national television, Comcast Arena, on TV. I'm gonna make it entertaining and fun. It's not going to be just about slinging mud. It's going to be about the facts. But let me assure you, folks like him, as they've capitulated to nearly that of every single bad law of George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and by that point, 2 years from now, either an additional 2 years of Obama or most likely the first 2 years of Romney's presidency, which is more like what I'm thinking, folks like Rick Larson and United States government officials that have capitulated to items as such as these guys are going to be very, very discredited and hated. And it's amazing how that 6-term congressman, as he's still rather powerful and loved by many people around here in my area of the world, which is just north of Seattle, Washington, the 2nd District, which goes from Everett, Washington up to the Canadian border. It includes what would be Snohomish, Whatcom and Skagit counties, along with Island. That, well, let's just say this. Once you view the person that you loved so much, your so-called best friend or whoever, leader, once you view Rick Larson or whoever, Obama, Mitt Romney, or whoever, once you see these people as not the guy or woman or whoever that's helping me, that's feeding my children, that's giving me opportunity, once you see these people as the one that's coming into your home and putting the knife to your throat, once you see them as the murderer in the night, wow. Well, I feel sorry for people like him. Now, some of you know out there that I came in on the 22nd of June at the request of Congressman Rick Larson to advise him, his office, in Everett regarding White House leaks, impeachment, Glass-Steagall Act, and what I really believe the main interest of why he had me go there has to do with The Hague and war crimes, crimes against humanity for people such as himself. I think that's what it is. He's worried. He wants to know what I know, and he wants to know how big and bad is this situation. Well, I advise his office. This is a time when you want to distance yourself from Obama. This is a time when you want to admit that you made mistakes. This is the time. That was June. And here we go. Coming on to, we're 3 months later. I think he's too far in the clouds to know where to go. And even if he's not too far up in the clouds, he's so far in. He's up to water to his throat, and like a lot of these people, they've got so much dirt on them, they get them to walk the way they want them to walk, but it's going straight to prison. And that's where I forecast. So, and I can assure you, when I get the United States Congress, guess what's going to happen? I am going to force not just GMO labeling, I'm going to force what would be a congressional inquiry to see if, that's right, because we got to do this legally, we got to have science to prove it. I'm going to see if these companies such as Monsanto, Cargill, whatever these other Archer, Midland, Daniels that make these genetically modified foods, we need to look into it and see if there is evidence showing that they know that this stuff is harming us. And if there is intent to harm us and factors such as a global conspiracy theory from folks such as the Queen of England, from folks such as computer guy over Microsoft, Bill Gates, over this or that, if we could find and prove and correlate that there is an evil, sinister means behind this, then what we need to do is treat them like we would any other terrorist operation or a drug dealer. What do you do when the police or FBI raid these people and they find out, okay, Mr. Drug Dealer that bought an island, an airplane, a fancy speedboat worth 160 grand and this and that and the other, and you bought all this money on drug money, which is illegal to begin with? We confiscate it, don't we? Isn't that how we treat petty thieves and dealers and this and that? Well, why don't we go for the big fish and treat them the same way? Now, I'm not normally into so-called raiding and robbing the rich and, whatever. Somehow, forcing people to hand over their goods that they earned and reconsolidating, or what you want to call it, redistributing their wealth. If you earned your money fairly, I believe in lowering the taxes. That's right. Not increasing taxes. I believe in lowering the taxes all around. So I have a lot of policies that are rather attractive on all sides of the line. As I'm an independent, I have a lot of factors that are very attractive to the Republican and Democratic sides. So I'm for guns, I'm for a lot of things, and I'm for building the interest of the nation. I want to get away from war. I want all of our troops back. I don't want one troop overseas for any conflict unless we have to be there, unless the United States security is dependent upon it, unless we are threatened and we have to be involved. So Libya was an illegal operation along with a lot of these factors. A lot of things were immoral and wrong, and we need to do something about that and change, not stay the course, but change the course of humanity. You need to put in New York Times. Google this. New York Times, Jimmy Carter, a cruel and unusual record. We're not going to go into this today like I want to, because we have extra video footage and things that we have to toss in here. But this needs to be addressed. You also need to hit Google as well, or XQuick, or other perhaps more private search engines that you may feel more comfortable with. If you don't like the NSA knowing every move and keystroke of yours, I don't blame you. So also Google, or whatever you want, NDAA Unconstitutional RT article. That's where you'll see this. And so much more. There's also the Army Field Manual for Re-Education Camps, which applies to United States citizens. That's right. And I'll give you the exact number. What you need to do is Google Army Field Manual FM 3-39.40. That's right, Field Manual 3-39.40. And this it has to do with internment and resettlement operations. It's a military field manual, and it discusses torture and all different kinds of crazy, obscene things that could happen to folks such as myself, Lyndon Larouche, Alex Jones, or any other patriot that discusses controversial materials or any other thing that doesn't go along with the status quo. So we see, everybody, we see it heating up in the world. We see a lot of things heating up. We're on the brink of World War III. Martin Dempsey won't be there as a chief of staff under the next administration. And I can assure you, whoever is will be a lot more inclined to go to war. Now, I have not seen the inherent evil within Mitt Romney as I have within the actions, murderous actions of this President Obama. But I can say this, there are some indicators that has me very suspicious and has me wondering. The reason is when you look at a lot of the advisors and the people around so far, around this most likely new to be president, Mitt Romney, these are the same folks as the circles of Dick Cheney and George W. Bush. I'm talking former ambassador to the United Nations, and other folks that were Bush appointees and whatnot. And of course, when I actually try to remember the ambassador's name, U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, of course I can't recall it. I've been talking about this a lot the last month. But anyway, it's kind of funny how that works. But anyway, so that's where it's at. It'll be on the blog, his name, coming up for our next lowdown blog over the next couple of days, which should be at the same time that this is. But anyway, so the moral of the story is, times are changing. We got to change too. The Constitution, don't let it be discredited in the back of your mind. We need the Constitution. When we go back to those principles, we can stave off any threat, physical, monetary, or anything else. But as a nation, we got to get beyond parties. Don't be loyal to your party. Don't be a Republican. Don't be a loyal Democrat. Be a loyal American. That's what I am. My goal and my vision for humanity is this. I want to see all sides of the line come together. So you can call yourself a Republican. You can call yourself a Democrat, a liberal, and call yourself whatever you will. But we got to get to policy. We got to get concentrated on the policies, not a party. We can party after the law is passed, and we got something to celebrate. We get to come home to our constituents and say, hey, we got jobs coming down the pipeline. And guess what? We can all party together. But we have to wait until, obviously, that we actually create something and whatever. So it's not a party system. After Andrew Jackson, we created this party system. Well, if you're loyal to your party, not your nation, you're destined to commit treason sooner or later, if you haven't already. So let's be loyal to the interest of the nation. Let's get back to the Constitution. Let's get to principles. Legislation, set and design and principles, not based upon what the Republican Party line agrees with, or the Democratic Party line. Republican Democratic Party lines agree with. Let's do what's right. Let's do what's right. A lot of you so-called Democrats out there know that we have a right to have guns, even if you don't like them. Well, my suggestion is this. If you don't want a gun for your house, don't buy one. I'll buy my fair share, let me assure you. I was looking at a real nice big 10 gauge the other day shotgun at Cabela's. I think I'm going to go back there and pick that up. I want to get a nice picture with it too here shortly. and show you some video footage of me shooting what would be my AK-47 recently. Because I want to show people the world. You don't have to be a thug. You don't have to be a gangster. You don't have to be a bad guy or woman to want a gun. Not even an assault rifle. You could be a regular, everyday, decent human being, an American that wants to protect your family and interests, and also be able to go out and enjoy certain what would be sporting exercises. I have a concealed weapons permit. Some of you know out there I carry a .45 pistol with me everywhere I go with hollow point shells. I'm going to continue to do that. If the law outlaws guns, well, guess what? The law don't mean jack shit at that point to me. Because the law of the land is not anything new, such as these Army field manuals, the new National Defense Authorization Act, or anything else. People try to say, oh, Kari, but you didn't hear about that new law they just passed. The law doesn't mean crap if it goes against the Constitution. It's called null and void. So any new law, because the United Nations or whoever says that we got to give up our firearms, any new law that says this or that, I'm not going to accept it. If the state of Washington makes raw milk illegal, guess what I'm going to still do? If I can find it, I'm still going to buy it. I'm still going to drink it. Simple as that. I may even become a raw milk dealer. Oh my God, did I just say that? I said I may be. I didn't say I will. The point is this. These things aren't crimes. It's a crime against humanity when the government is in your toilet, in your bathroom, in your room, telling you what kind of light bulb, how many drip drops of water you can flush. That is a crime against humanity. That is wrong. So I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to do what's right. Some people out there look at me as an extremist, an anarchist, this or that. I'm not that stuff. I believe in the rule of law. I believe in it. So when I said I don't give a SHIT about the law, I do give an SHIT about the law. A lot. The Constitution. I'm taking my resources, my time out of my busy schedule to make this a full-time job. That's right. My full-time job is now right here. NoSpinNewsSource.com. Working for you, the people. That's right. Sometimes it may appear that I'm getting a little behind on this or that, but trust me, it's, you know, it's a lot to do. And now I'm being bombarded with information of all sorts. But I'm excited because now people are beginning to step aside, especially as they see what's happening. And people of all sorts are beginning to come to me. They're giving me information, they're sharing knowledge, and willing to step by step get closer and whatnot to Kari Ilonummi. And it's funny how that works as things are impending. I have a feeling that anybody that's involved in the libertarian movement is going to find themselves becoming very popular over the next year to come. So anyways, so we have some economic video action for you. Thanks from the guys at LPAC that'll break down a little bit more of what would be the American system of political economy, followed by, at the end, a little humor, but something that kind of fits into politics as well. We have some old Jesse Ventura American wrestling footage from some of his younger days from the end of 1983 as we were going into 1984 at that point. I would have only been a few months old, so I don't remember personally, but as 1983 was the year I was born. But ultimately, you know, there's a little bit of funny factors and stuff in there, but it fits into politics as he brings up to Mean Gene the aspect of George Orwell in 1984. So, it's Friday, it's September, this is your monthly report. I thank you guys out there, everybody. We have state reps, Emmy Award winners, actors, PhDs, all different kinds of people beginning to follow us now on Twitter and other elements and getting closer to the action. It's exciting. Let's work together as a team. Let's make this happen. As they say, many hands make light work. So, I'm Kari Ilonummi, signing off with NoSpinNewsSource.com. We will see you back here very shortly, and I can assure you as well there will be news articles and lots of filling in all of those empty spaces of the website over fall and winter to come. So thank you very much. I appreciate your prayers, emails, and everything of support. I need them. Keep them coming in, folks. I love you guys. From now till then, until I see you, God willing, take care of yourself and each other, and remember, we have to get through this as a team. So don't be breaking up from your friends and everybody else. Don't burn those bridges, because this is something we all got into, this jam together, and it's going to take all of our hands and resources to get out of this mess. So I'm Kari Ilonummi signing off with NoSpendNewsSource.com. See you next month.
So I want to talk about our solution to the danger of hyperinflation and global warfare right now, which are two directions and endpoints that are being generated by the same global collapse of the transatlantic financial system on the one side, and on the other side, the growing physical economic productivity of Russia and China. And the powers that be have determined that there's no way that the transatlantic financial system is going to collapse without war with Russia and China, the real target of this current strategic blowout of the Middle East. And that is what's now going on. We have a war that was organized by the British and the Saudis that has not been exposed and is now driving Obama toward his errand in the Middle East. So this current danger that we're facing is generated by this collapse of the whole system and a strategic crisis between the sovereign nation state system and the empire. Now, right now, we're faced with immediate threat now of hyperinflation with the collapse of the system. And what went through on September 14th at the same time as the Fed made its QE3 announcement, the ESM ruling from Karl's rule saying that this would be a great thing to go ahead and get this infinite bailout for Europe. And then Draghi and the ECB saying we're going to have unlimited bond buying of countries in Europe. All of this is spelling the final phase of collapse of this whole system. So our solution I want to talk about, which is the only real workable plan that here at LaRouche PAC we've got the 3-point plan, Glass-Steagall, credit system, and NWAPA 21, as the kind of thing which has to be put together regardless of partisan politics right now. We have a number of people around the country who all realize that this system's finished. More and more, in fact. Some people want to put together a new financial system based on gold, some on debt-free money, some on just some quasi-Glass-Steagall reform, some on a full Glass-Steagall reform. Other people just want to get their guns and tuna. But most people all know that this system's done. That's what ties people together. What is needed, however, is the Lyndon Larouche plan, which is a plan of reorganization based not on money. There's no way you're going to get some new monetary system, whatever it's based on, that is going to generate a recovery. What we need is productivity, scientific productivity, as the measurement of that system. Now that is what we at LaRouche PAC here are uniquely proposing. Nobody else has the clear sense of how that would be done. And I say, what we need here, what we need is to sit down with the people in the United States and put together the team of nonpartisan patriots who will put together an economic plan. Now, that economic plan is something that has to be put together by people who have the complete overview of how this system should work. What is our productive capacity? How many people do we need to be employed? What do we need as far as the water system? How many of our machine tool sector is collapsing? How much of our food production is collapsing? Those are the kinds of things that we need to figure out, and we get a master plan based on that, and I'll say more about that in a minute. In addition to that, we have to have the full use of the Congress's powers, which they've given up to the financial markets and everybody else over a long period of time, and most recently in 2007, handing over the power of the purse to Wall Street. That has to be returned. But Glass-Steagall is not going to be a magic fix. We can't simply go back to banking regulation and think that somehow that's just going to bring the economy back to a prosperous period. Simply stated, a banking system that has no deposits in it can't lend any money. And the issue now is that there's a lot of people who are pushing Glass-Steagall. We have it as a possibility. We have a lot of co-sponsors in Congress. You should get your congressmen and co-sponsors if they haven't done it already. Get them to introduce it now. It would be a key thing to stop hyperinflation. However, it's not enough. We need to have a sense of what the new economy should look like that a new banking system would relate to. And so a bank system that's just regulated is going to be a hollow shell if we don't actually have it set up on the basis of accomplishing certain tasks. The national interest demands a network of people to plan out a productive development plan. That plan is going to be the basis for the system of banking, which is going to maximize everything we've got left as far as our real productivity, real capital. And along with the powers of Congress, that will then be a group, and with the powers of Congress will be a group and a plan that can actually form a new banking system, which will look a lot like what we had before Jackson. So let's look at how the system works right now, and let's look at what other plans are out there. Okay, the problem with the Federal Reserve, which was initially created after the 1907 stock market crash to try to have some way in which we could bail out the stock market if there was some crisis like that again. All it does is the Treasury of the United States now does not have sovereignty over its money because it says it's going to get money by selling its debt to certain private banks, and then those banks either loan that debt or the Fed buys the debt from them, and by buying the debt it prints money, and then that money now is circulated by those private banks to whatever the private banks want to do. What the market of securities and debt of companies and the debt of the government, and so-called the market. So the United States is not linking its creation of debt to the means, but to extinguish that debt. It's antithetical to Hamilton's original maxim, which said that the creation of a debt has to have the means to extinguish it directly tied to it, which really was about creating productivity increases and the debt as a tool to do that. And you link the debt to those productivity increases. So the Federal Reserve, completely antithetical to what the National Bank was under Hamilton as the means to carry out that maxim and make sure that the government's finances were following that maxim and make sure that we succeeded in that way. So this Treasury, this Federal Reserve System is simply, it's creating debt for the financial markets. Now everybody knows how crazy it is right now, but the fundamental problem is, you got to cut through all the crap you hear about it. The fundamental problem is you can't get a loan from your Federal Reserve branch to buy a canal if you've got a Federal Reserve Bank in your city. You could do that with the National Bank. However, if you want to trade in the derivatives market and you're in with the Federal Reserve banks and the associated banks, oh hey, you can get interest-free nothing. But if you want to build something real in this country, you can't get credit anywhere. The interest rates are completely flipped. In fact, you're paying 20% for a credit card if you're Joe Schmo. But if you're a private bank that's going to trade in derivatives, as we know, these interest rates are almost zero. So this whole pyramid, the whole interest rate scheme is actually flipped from what it should be. So let's look at now what we have besides the Fed. Do we have a credit lending institution? No, we don't. The Small Business Administration, which is much touted by the Obama administration, has 2% of the loans that are in the country, 10% of the total volume. Nothing to speak about, because the rest of the loans done by the FDIC to insure loans that other banks are making is not a whole lot. And everybody knows not enough to generate any recovery, as we've got now complete unemployment, virtual breadlines, and just complete economic devastation. Everybody knows how bad the situation is now. So what about proposals that are out there, infrastructure banks? Well, I looked at some of these proposals, and the bottom line is they all pander far too much to the private sector. And although they do have an idea of connecting investors with the people who want to borrow the money and being more efficient than simple state infrastructure banks would be, and they do make a good point about linking different projects together because you'd have one federal institution doing it. The big problem is it pandering to the private sector to come up with the capital. And as the banks are now screaming that if you try to regulate our capital requirements, we're going to now have less money to loan for your infrastructure projects, you see the real problem. And so the fundamental issue here, the problem with these infrastructure banks that are proposed, besides the fact you probably open up a hatch and Felix Rohatyn's going to come out and look at you. He's probably hiding in there somewhere. The problem is you're operating an infrastructure bank, so-called, in a context of a completely unregulated currency and a whole system which is on its way to hyperinflation. So it would never work. But as far as how the mechanics of it go, it's not regulating the currency. It's operating inside a derivatives speculated currency. The Bank of the United States, Hamilton's bank, regulated the currency. In fact, it was the chief means to execute the Congress's power to regulate the currency, and it did that in various ways. Other problem, it doesn't actually choose which projects on the basis of actual productivity. That would have to be part of the plan of the bank. You can't lend for green projects which are not going to be scientifically profitable. They may be financially profitable in this economy right now for various crazy reasons, but if you're going to actually make good on the debt and the credit of the government is at stake, you better have actual scientific productivity. So that is the other issue here. So what's clear is we need a third Bank of the United States. There's no other credit institution right now. And we're at a point where we can't just simply go to some kind of historical precedent, the RFC or something. The situation is so far gone, nothing short of fully reorganizing the whole system on the basis of maintaining the physical assets and scientific productivity we still have left, which is not enough, which is not a lot. So we've got to go down, we've got to say, let's look at what real wealth and capital is. It's things that have the potential to create an increase in living standard, things that have the potential to increase the productivity of the economy, machine factories, machine tool, floor space that's not being used, farming. This is what real productivity is. We've got to now say, these things have a value. We have to look at the value of these things as something which is not necessarily fixed, but it's in an environment of the infrastructure of the economy, certain institutions that can be brought into place, how we're regulating the currency. Those things are going to change their value when we organize the system and set up a new banking system for it. So we don't let we don't let money right now, which is completely a speculative thing. It has a speculative defined value. We don't let that determine what the value is of the economy. We're going to set up a new system that's based on physical productivity as the measurement. And we're going to do that. The amount of bank lending that can go on in the new system of a third bank and its branches will be regulated to the function of how much we can actually achieve productively. That's how the second Bank of the United States worked. Because these things that we're going to determine when we sit down and reorganize this, the things that we determine have value will have some, they will be able to be deposited, they will have some valid ratio of their amount to how much can be lent. And that is essentially how the system works. And then you can bring in the government credit, and I'll say that in a minute. But the banks should essentially be agents of the community. There's nothing in banks except they make a small profit from lending money, but there's nothing really in the banks besides funds that have already been lent out to the people, of whose property and industry they're simply the representatives. Banks are just other names for the farms, the commerce, the factories, and the internal improvements of the country. The bank was the means to improve and develop those things, and that's what the bank has to become again. But we have to have a clear plan of how we're going to develop those things if we're going to have a bank do anything. It can't be simply a mechanical thing. So the amount of lending in the bank is essentially going to be determined by how much of our physical assets we still have, in addition to how much we need to generate. And here is where the U.S., the credit function can really come in outside of simply the credit of the national bank. But in addition, an example of how the credit of the government can work, the Bank of the United States under John Quincy Adams was used not simply as a tool to decide what to loan for to generate the canals and the rails and the companies and all the farmers out the west, everything else. But he also subscribed to the capital stock of companies, canal companies and things, had the Secretary of Treasury do that. It was authorized by the Congress. And he said, we're going to pay for our amount of subscribed capital of these companies, allowing the companies now to buy the supplies they needed to build the canals, because they say, well, we have this capital from the U.S. Treasury Secretary, by the revenues that would come from the Bank of the United States. So the dividends from the bank stock that the United States had subscribed to, was invested in, we say the dividends that are going to come due, that dividend, that profit of the Bank of the United States, which represented the economy, we're going to earmark to our capital subscription to these canal companies. So this is how the credit system, the U.S. government would put itself behind some of these projects and pay for it. That's really called capital budgeting. So now, how the system worked as far as generating the growth of the economy in general, we want to talk a little bit about this. This is absolutely essential to understand. Right now there's a whole bunch of talk about debt, budgeting, cost, and the big one, debt. Everything's, you listen to the radio, everything's about debt. Well, I'll just tell you here, you got it wrong if you don't have these historical precedents of Hamilton, List, the Carys, John Quincy Adams, and so forth. Debt was a right in the time of John Quincy Adams. It was a right to go into debt for something, for productive purposes. You don't make poor people not poor by just giving them money. You give them the right to go into debt at a very low interest for productive purposes. And that was what all the farmers did in the United States. All you had to do was be moral, you had to have skill, and you had to have commitment, and you could, on that basis, become someone, a productive farmer, a machine tool owner, these kinds of things. This is the so-called American dream. It wasn't some guy with some gold in his pocket showing up, buying a piece of land, and then making it big. He showed up with nothing. And he got a loan from a merchant to buy the supplies, and he got a loan to get the farm from a merchant who himself got a loan from, guess where? The Bank of the United States. And there was no burdensome characteristic of any of this debt. There was nothing wrong about this debt that people went into. They knew they would be able to pay it off much better by the production that they would ensue upon. It didn't lower their living standard at all, because they weren't making cuts to pay off the debt that they had. It wasn't like the farmers said, okay, wife, you're going to have to cut out that pork chop tonight because we need to tighten our belts. In fact, what they did is they ended up working harder, and they settled new lands, and it was all done on credit, and it would pay itself off on that basis. Again, the merchants would sell to the farmers based on what they'd earn next year, and next year's harvest would settle the accounts. And contrary to the maxim of people had in Europe, they grew rich, although they continued in debt, constantly augmenting the value of the farms. So each year they'd get some new luxury, comfort, and they didn't hesitate to buy and purchase on credit because they'd be certain that they'd be able to pay off the next year. And that is how basically the system worked on the personal level, but also worked on the national scale. And that's what the National Bank did. The debt under the U.S. Congress and with the regulated currency and the credit fund of the National Bank was similarly not a burden. In fact, 75% of the capital of the bank was debt, and it was a prosperous country. Robert Hare, an economist and chemist in 1810, pointed out the greatest problem, a rational fear in the United States at that time, was the fear of accruing a national debt in order to build a navy. And of course, here we're about to go to war with Britain. We needed a navy. And he pointed out, why the credit system was superior to so-called money. Because credit would link people to the future. It would create a moral citizenship because they would now be accountable to the credit that they took out. And everything we built in this country at that time was because you knew you could get credit and you could get a loan. You can't do that right now. It's not available. The system is not set up on that basis. So long as things were for productive purposes, national debt was not an issue. So long as we would increase our overall productivity, and whether it's a long-term debt for canals, which the next generation would be well suited to pay off because of the increase in productivity and exports and everything else that canals and rails did, it was a fine investment. So when we look at infrastructure, we look at growing the economy, when we look at the expenditures for these things, as a lot of people want to talk about it today in the United States, you don't look at these as expenditures. You look at them as investments that are going to increase the public wealth and revenue and ability of the state. And he made an interesting point when he wrote this paper, that you have to actually subtract the cost of the things that are involved when you go into, when you appropriate money for something like building a navy. And he said, look at the timber and the iron. You got to subtract that, which otherwise would have been useless in the mine. Look at the wages and the profits earned by all the workers involved. You got to subtract that. How much does an investment like this really cost? Well, actually it costs negative usually when you look at it in the right way. Subtract all the hours of wasted idleness of the workers. So look at all these things which wouldn't have been put in motion without, and all the effort and the labor of the people which would have been wasted had we not made this so-called expenditure. And that is what really what the credit system is all about. What is the waste without this, without the stimulus of the credit, of our credit that would have ensued, without the industry that we would have incited with credit to carry out these tasks? What is the waste? So what we really need in the budget committee, we need a productivity budget, and something that measures these different potentials that are being wasted. The greatest cost of our nation right now is the loss of productivity year by year, the waste of scientists, the waste of our minds. So rather than just measuring costs in monetary terms, we've got to include these other measurements of wealth and capital, and of what real wealth and capital are. These measurements, physical things, and the potential of science. So even, I mean, you look at this case right now, money right now is not even a good measure of value, especially right now with the whole speculative system. So it's a different kind of measure of value that we have to look at when we look at budgeting. A productivity budget is what we actually want. Money can correspond to value. Money can correspond to value, but only when it's part of a growing credit system. Because only a credit system can accurately define value. And that is what, in the studies of Nicholas Biddle and the Second Bank, that's what you understand. So the founders of our country created a credit bank to channel every possible surplus into increasing productivity. For the general welfare, for the good of the country, all the powers were set up to do that. And by doing that, the nation will always easily develop and maintain the system as a whole, and not become fat and lazy. Now, I just want to conclude by saying the key difference, the Federal Reserve fiat money is a vice, right? That is the problem, because none of it is linked to the actual economy that is supposed to grow because of that money. The bank's money, on the other hand, went into circulation, and it bore a proper relation to the real business of the community. It kept everything else in check, and the bank was interfacing with business and everything else as a legislative way in which you regulated the means of exchange and coordinated the exchange rates. And now you created a system in which individuals and businesses and companies could all grow, and there was credit. And just sitting there and saying, we hope the market works, grow. You have people sitting around praying to the market. It's ridiculous. Nothing's going to happen. No recovery is ever going to take place. It's not going to happen. You're waiting for something that's never going to happen unless we get a credit system. And that starts by enough people that are the key people in the United States right now, patriots, sitting down and figuring out, square one, throwing the axioms off the table and figuring out what is it in our country we need to build right now.
This is a fairly volatile situation, and it is in response not to United States policy, not to, obviously, the administration, not to the American people. It is in response to a video, a film, that
President Barack Obama's administration lied to the public. They had no interest in speaking to the truth of the events that led to Ambassador Chris Stevens' death in Benghazi. The role they chose to take bends towards criminal complicity. As we will document, the administration worked to mislead public attention from the fact that advance warnings among U.S. sources and Libyan officials were provided hours and weeks in advance of an impending threat in the Benghazi region and did nothing to provide proper security. The Obama administration propagated the lie that the attacks were not the result of a coordinated pre-planned offensive. Why? That question should be answered during his impeachment. And that is the bottom line. The president's behavior before and after the Benghazi attacks is case enough. He cannot be entrusted the office of the presidency. He must now choose to either resign and leave quietly or face impeachment. Democrat or Republican, the facts speak. He must face trial and answer to the law.
My colleague from the Associated Press asked you a direct question. Was there any intelligence suggesting that there would be an attack on the U.S. consulates? You said that a story, referred to a story being false, and said there was no actionable intelligence. But you didn't answer his question. Was there any intelligence period, suggesting that there was going to be an attack on either the...
There was no intelligence that in any way could have been acted on to prevent these attacks.
Contrary to what Jay Carney was told by the White House to peddle during a press conference, which took place 3 days after the Benghazi strike, multiple sources exposed that advance warnings were given to U.S. officials, the State Department, the CIA, and the White House. Knowledge of those advance warnings were confirmed by 4 separate sources, which are: 1. A senior Pentagon source confirmed with a writer for Executive Intelligence Review that the Obama White House was in fact told in advance of a pending attack prior to the September 11, 2012 assault on the Benghazi consulate. According to the Pentagon source, both the Defense Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency provided detailed warnings to both the White House and the CIA that attacks were being planned against American targets in Benghazi. Their reports were detailed enough, he said, that they identified the Ansar al-Sharia group as being directly involved in the planned consulate strike. Information given to both the CIA and the White House which should have been acted upon. 2. On September 17th, CNN was told by Jamal Mabrouk, a member of the February 17th Brigade in Libya, that he warned U.S. diplomats 3 days before the assault that security was deteriorating in Benghazi, and this was not the first time he expressed such warnings. As told to CNN, Jamal Mabrouk recounted that he and a battalion commander had a meeting with American diplomats in Benghazi to discuss the economy and security. CNN reported that, quote, he said they told the diplomats that the security situation wasn't good for international business. The situation is frightening. It scares us, Mabrouk said they told the U.S. officials. He did not say how they responded. Mabrouk said it was not the first time he has warned foreigners about the worsening security situation in the face of the growing presence of armed jihadist groups in the Benghazi area. 3. Kim Sengupta, defense correspondent with The Independent, revealed through the publication that senior diplomatic sources confirmed that the U.S. State Department had credible information 48 hours in advance that American missions may be targeted. In addition, The Independent reported that Patrick Kennedy, Undersecretary at the State Department, said he was convinced the assault was planned due to its extensive nature and the proliferation of weapons used. Parallel to Jamal Mabrouk's own warnings to U.S. diplomats, members of the Libyan Interior Ministry had been warning U.S. officials for weeks leading up to the Benghazi attack that the security situation in Benghazi area was deteriorating rapidly. Armed militias, many of them neo-Salafi allied with al-Qaeda, were gaining strength and had penetrated all of the relevant security institutions in the region, said officials with the Libyan Interior Ministry. With these multiple advance warnings given, nothing was done to protect the lives of U.S. officials in Benghazi, where 4 were murdered by extremists, including America's face in Libya, Ambassador Christopher Stevens. Probably one of the most relevant warnings of all was revealed by Stevens himself, who looks to have died because of the negligence of President Barack Obama. 4 days after the attack, CNN found a journal discovered to have belonged to Ambassador Stevens. With only 7 pages of his handwriting, the journal contained information that led CNN to investigate and confirm with a source identified as close to his thinking. In conclusion, CNN reported, quote, that in the months before his death, he talked about being worried about what he called the never-ending security threats, specifically in Benghazi. This source told us that the ambassador specifically mentioned the rise in Islamic extremism, the growing al-Qaeda presence in Libya, and said he was an al-Qaeda hit list. Shouldn't an ambassador's own concerns of rising extremism and having knowledge of being on a terrorist hit list be sufficient intelligence to upgrade security or evacuate an ambassador from his post to protect his life?
All the precautions being taken. But let's be clear. But
being very good are different things.
Jake, let's be clear. These protests were in reaction to a video that had spread to the region.
At Benghazi?
We certainly don't know. We don't know otherwise. We have no information to suggest that it was a pre-planned attack.
2 facts are worth considering with this claim. First, UN Ambassador Susan Rice's assertions contradicted by Libyan President Magharef, and second, information from U.S. intelligence sources who spoke with the Daily Beast. First, in addition to denying advance warnings of a pending strike, the Obama administration had Jay Carney joined by U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Susan Rice, on September 16th, asserting that an anti-Islam video posted months ago caused what they called a spontaneous assault on September 11th. Appearing on Face the Nation, ABC's This Week, and Meet the Press, Rice unabashedly told millions of viewers that the attacks were not the result of a pre-planned offensive. It was the result of a spontaneous protest. In her exact words, Susan Rice told CBS's Face the Nation, quote, "What our assessment is as of the present is in fact what began spontaneously in Benghazi as a reaction to what had transpired some hours earlier in Cairo, sparked by this hateful video. We do not have information at present that leads us to conclude that this was premeditated or pre-planned." Contrary to the claims asserted by Obama's White House via Susan Rice, just prior to the UN ambassador's appearance on Face the Nation with Bob Schiffer, Schiffer interviewed Libyan President Mohammed Youssef el-Magharef, who said on Face the Nation, "The way these perpetrators acted and moved, and they're choosing the specific date for this so-called demonstration, this leaves us with no doubt that this was pre-planned, determined, predetermined. It was planned, definitely. It was planned by foreigners, by people who entered the country a few months ago, and they were planning this criminal act since their arrival." Perhaps it was pressure from the White House that led Susan Rice to continue the assertion that the attack was spontaneous and no other assessment could be made, despite President Magharef's statement to the contrary. Should we infer that the White House does not view the Libyan president's information, which led him to make that conclusion worthy of an assessment? Well, if the objective is to cover up for a terrorist attack, that makes sense. Second, the Daily Beast confirmed with 3 separate U.S. intelligence officials who spoke under the condition of anonymity that information was provided early enough to show that the attack was planned and the work of al-Qaeda affiliates operating in eastern Libya. As documented by Eli Lake of the Daily Beast, the intelligence officials who spoke to the Daily Beast did so anonymously because they weren't authorized to speak to the press. They said U.S. intelligence agencies developed leads on 4 of the participants of the attacks within 24 hours of the firefight that took place mainly at an annex near the Benghazi consulate. For one of those individuals, the U.S. agencies were able to find his location after his use of social media. We had 2 kinds of intelligence on one guy, this official said. We believe we had enough to target him. Another U.S. intelligence official said, there was very good information on this in the first 24 hours. These guys have a return address. There are camps of people and a wide variety of things we could do. Weighing the administration's words against the intelligence sources makes the case. According to this information, the administration never had any basis to make the claims it set Susan Rice to preach on September 16th. Why exactly was she put up to the task? The impeachment and trial of President Barack Obama can ensure that this question is answered.
He would be attacked, and that is false.
Why was there not adequate security around Ambassador Stevens?
In the months leading up to the second 9/11 attack, the U.S. consulate in Benghazi was attacked twice. First, on April 6, 2 former security guards hurled improvised explosives at the consulate. On June 6, 2 days after the killing of a Libyan-born cleric, Abu al-Libi, by a U.S. drone strike, an improvised explosive device was set off outside the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, damaging the building's gate. That attack was immediately followed by another attack on June 11th, targeting a British embassy convoy in Benghazi by a rocket-propelled grenade. This latter attack quickly led to the immediate shutdown of the British consulate. Taking into account the growing danger, the U.S. State Department released the following warning on August 27th. The Department of State warns U.S. citizens against all but essential travel to Libya. Political violence, including car bombings in Tripoli and assassinations of military officers and alleged former regime officials in Benghazi, has increased. Inter-militia conflict can erupt at any time or any place in the country. When the British embassy convoy was attacked on June 11th, the British responded with the immediate shutdown of their consulate. The American mission remained opened after it was attacked twice, and only closed after the 3rd strike as a result of jihadists showering the place with RPGs and heavy weapons fire. So what exactly was the security provided at the consulate? Amidst the growing presence of terrorist activity, the U.S. consulate was protected by unarmed details stationed inside, hired by British private security Blue Mountain, and local militias outside. Under these conditions, Special Marine forces should have been dispatched. Were they? No. If the administration had the intention of defending American missions abroad from what should have been an anticipated attack on the anniversary of a major terrorist attack against the nation, the executive would have used the U.S. Marine Fleet anti-terrorism security team that was located in Rota, Spain, which could have arrived within hours in response to 2 attacks against the U.S. consulate prior, and a State Department warning which used the explicit language of possible assassinations. Did Obama deploy the Special Marines team from Rota, Spain to Libya? Again, no. They were dispatched only after the death of 4 Americans, when their objective is to preempt an attack. If the administration's idea of defending U.S. foreign missions, which represent the face of America in another territory, is to hire local militias which may be compromised to the enemy, and Blue Mountain's private staff of unarmed individuals, this shows gross incompetence or outright complicity. In either case, it merits impeachment. As a result of the evidence provided here, with many more not mentioned, members of the U.S. Senate attempted to establish an appropriate investigation, which was blocked by an opportunistic Senator John Kerry of Massachusetts. John Kerry also was responsible for letting Obama off the hook for his violation of the War Powers Act and Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution to invade Libya via airstrikes in 2011, which turned the region into a perfect breeding ground for jihadist operatives. But beyond Benghazi, we see with close examination, since his entering office in 2009, that Obama's role has not been to serve the interests of the United States, but that of a financial empire which provides the infrastructure for global terrorism to thrive. He lied to the faces of the families of 9/11 victims when he promised to declassify the 28 pages which revealed crucial details of the Saudi role in the original 9/11 attack. He intervened through Elena Kagan to prevent 9/11 families from suing members of the Saudi royal family under the excuse of sovereign immunity. As a result of his actions, Obama continued the cover-up of the initial 9/11 attacks, effectively defending the infrastructure that made that operation possible. His defense of that infrastructure made 9/11-2 in Benghazi possible. The facts of his actions speak for itself. He is covering up for global elements that use terrorism. Why? Impeach him, and we may have our answers.
Say the body Ventura back in the AWA. I'm going to be talking to him in just a moment or two. Again, I want to reflect on 1983, tremendous resurgence in fan enthusiasm for All-Star Wrestling, and on that note, I want to tell you 1984 is going to be bigger and better, and from all of us to all of you, once again, a very happy holiday season. Jesse the Body Ventura, come on in. We have, what in the world? What is this hanging out of your left ear?
What does it look like to you, Mean Gene? I can't get in the holiday spirit.
Well, of course
I'm the most big, most beautiful Christmas tree coming into all those homes out there, all throughout the United States. Jesse the Body, Christmas. Can you imagine? All you women out there, you stop and think for a minute. You take a look at that fat, pot-bellied dude sitting next to you, eating pretzels and drinking beer, and take a look at Jesse the Body in real life coming into your screen.
Wait a minute, Jesse, really?
That's definitely going to cause some family turmoil. But now let's get down to business. Christmas spirit's in. Jesse the Body's happy. I'm flying out with my ornaments. I'm head of the Rose Bowl Parade. I'm riding in the limo in the Rose Bowl Parade. But now we're going to get on to something else. As you know, 1983's leaving. 1984 is coming in. Now, 1984, you stop and think about 1984 for a second. What comes to mind, Mean Gene? Something you ought to look at. George Orwell's 1984, Big Brother's watching.
Coming up, Big Brother.
Big Brother's watching, and I know for a fact somebody ought to be watching you, and you can get in a lot of trouble. But now, 1984 is also the year of the body. It's been proclaimed. In 1984, coming up, Jesse the Body Ventura is going to come across with an announcement that is going to shock wrestling. It's going to be so big, Mean Gene, that I think some hair might even grow on the top of your head.
Oh, what would you have?
What do you think about that? So all you people out there, you get ready, because Jesse the Body, tune in your sets next week, because next week, the Body, your leader, is going to tell you what is coming down, Jack. Ooh, look at that. There's a 1984-inch arm right there.
Ladies and gentlemen.
We're going to write it right in front of your steaming eyes. You know, because people always ask me, how do you write a song? And I don't know, I think everybody can write songs, you know? And I'll prove it to you. Who wants to come up here and help us write a song? Come on. Come on. You want to come on up? Okay. I'll pick a couple of people, okay? You. Yes. From the Evo experience. Come on up. Actually, I'm gonna have him do it. All right. Come on up here. Aki. All right. Italy. Grazie. Paisan, he says with a New York accent. Okay, what's your name?
Chris Reich.
All right, Chris.
Joe Polito. I was saying hi to my buddy. Hey, where's Livernat?
What's your name? Don't fool around up here.
Joe Polito. Polito. Hey.
Okay, Joe Polito, hey. Okay, and what's your name?
Zayden Miller.
What?
Zayden Miller.
Zayden Miller. Now there's a voice. All right, you guys. Are you a musician, Zayden? You are? Okay, very good, because actually step over here. I don't want you to stand in front of my amps because I want you to have children someday, Zayden. Stand right over the microphone. That's right. Take me out of this, it'll leave. Okay, very good. All right, now, this is actually very easy and very fun. Everybody's got some rhythm in them, right? So let me hear you sing a drum beat. I'm impressed. Pressure team. Okay, that's a cool groove. Let's hear that groove again. Is that correct? Very good. Okay, Joe. We need a bass line. Can you sing a bass line for us? 3, 4. Boom, doom, doom, boom, doom, 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 boom, doom, 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 doom. Okay, now what we're going to do here, you're going to, keep it going a little bit. Give Dave something to play, just something funky, just kind of move your wrist around there. Oh no, he's playing rhythm, he's playing Save Yourself for Me. Yeah, tell him what to play. A secret, and that secret is that everybody wishes they could play the harp, because the harp you just get to stroke and stroke and feel like this. Show Deborah something to play on the harp. Just give her a little action with your hands there. Over and over again. Okay, I think we're working on something pretty cool here. All right. Okay. All right, Zayden. Okay, now you have the most important part. You have to write a melody for me. Okay? And it needs to be completely brilliant, totally inspired. It has to come from the depths of your soul and touch everybody that hears it. Just make believe you're Joe Satriani. Let's hear that groove again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Someplace. Thank you. Thanks a lot. You guys rock, but I keep the publishing. Actually, no, if we do something with this song, because we will be recording, how about we give the publishing to the Make a Noise Foundation? All right, sounds good, because we wrote it together here. All right, great. enjoy the rest of the show, and I'm going to arrange this song. You don't mind if I arrange it a bit? You know, I am Steve Vai. But you're Joe Polito from Italy. Mille grazie. Buongiorno, prego. Hey, no touching the harp player. Only $10. He went over there and played with Deborah's G-string. There's a lot of good, cheap jokes in there. Okay, guys, check it out. Let's start this thing out with a little, just start out with just Dave and hi-hat, okay? Shaka-ticka-ticka-ticka-ticka-ticka, like a straight eighth note thing. Chicka-ticka-ticka-ticka, like a funky, you know, wah-wah. And then put a hoe, come in with the groove. Okay, let it cook for about, you know, a few rounds, and I'll come in with a melody, and I'll embellish the melody a bit because I can. Right? And then watch me for a cue, do a break, and go into this, go into like a rhythmic groove. Move it, we're in B. Move it up a minor third to D, D minor, and go into like a ba-da, ga, 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 ba. Can you remember that? For the solo, move the solo up a minor third, I'll give you the cue, and just do a rhythm pattern of and I'll solo on top of that in D, like this, right? One, ga-ga, back, one, ga-ga, ga. And then eventually, as I'm soloing, you pick up and start soloing with me. Just start taking it out there. Watch me for a cue for a whole, bring it back down to B, I'll play the melody, and we'll take it on out. See, anybody can write a song. You think they can do it?
NoSpinNewsSource.com.